Hello and welcome to the Darwin Blinks channel. Although today is a somber occasion as we're paying tribute to Tom Seaver as his passing was announced. He actually passed on the 31st on Monday, but it was officially announced to the public, to the media today, September 2nd. And we are here to defend Seaver as the greatest pitcher of all time, greatest right hand pitcher, certainly. He's got the seventh highest WAR of all time at 109.9. Not a radio station, that's his WAR. WAR is wins above replacement. It's not a be all end all stat. And I know a lot of old timers, in fact, probably Seaver fans, don't like it, although I'm going to use the WAR to explain why he's the best pitcher of all time, in part. WAR does use various facets of a pitcher's performance to determine just how much value that pitcher represents, and certainly in comparison to his peers. The six pitchers ahead of him on the list, again, he's seventh all time in pitcher WAR. The six pitchers ahead of him are either from the distant past or it's Roger Clemens, Mr. Steroid. So when it comes to WAR, in my opinion, Seaver's the greatest because he pitched against the best competition in the post, Jackie Robinson era, and when there was more racial equality and player equality in baseball, and he excelled in that again, to the extent. I mean, his WAR is much higher than say Koufax because Koufax had injuries and didn't pitch as long and develops later than Seaver did. But so you could actually argue Seaver is better than Koufax, but we'll just go with the greatest right-hander of all time at the very least, and arguably the greatest pitcher of all time. Now, unlike many pitchers, Seaver also made the adjustment to the American League at a time when the leagues were quite different. Now, especially if the NL gets the DH permanently, they're going to be pretty much indistinguishable from each other. But back in 1984, when he joined the White Sox, that's my other favorite team, Mets and the White Sox, so you can see another reason why I'm a huge Tom Seaver fan. He made the adjustment, and as we all know, he won his 300th game with the White Sox. A lot of times, NL pitchers, when they go to the American League, they can't handle the different style of play, especially back then, but he adjusted nicely. In fact, he even pitched better that year than he had like 2 or 3 years previously in the National League with the Reds. And Mets, his final year with them officially or in full in 1983, when they foolishly let him get away. And he ended up winning his 300th game with the White Sox when he could have won it with the Mets when they became a suddenly a good team. Just when they got rid of Seaver, they became good. So that kind of didn't work out. But it worked out for me as a White Sox fan living in Chicago because I got to see Seaver in person and watch him on TV all the time, which back then you didn't have cable and streaming and all that. Hank Aaron said Tom Seaver was the toughest pitcher he ever had to face. He turned around a Mets team that was a total joke of a franchise. I mean, before Seaver got there, they never went more than 9 games in a season without being over 500. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's how much they were just the biggest joke in baseball, just baseball history, until Seaver arrived and turned it around. Not overnight, but eventually. And by his third year, they were world champs. And then they were consistent contenders in the NL East for the next few years. And of course, they won another pennant in '73, and they almost won the World Series against a vastly superior Oakland A's team that had won 3 straight World Series. So it's funny if the Mets had beaten the A's in that World Series, they would have been the best team of that era, like '69 through '73, '74. But because the A's won that game, they were the best team of that era. He won. Of course, he won 3 Cy Youngs, as we all know. But you could argue he should have won at least 2 more in '71 and '81. I'll get into '81 more in depth in a bit. In all, Seaver had 10 top 10 finishes in the Cy Young. So half the seasons he played in Major League Baseball, he was in the top 10 in Cy Young voting. And in 8 of those top 10 seasons, he was in the top 5. So in 8 of his 20 seasons, he finished in the top 5 in Cy Young voting. So he definitely could have won more than 3. Again, Cy Young's a voting thing, and sometimes they didn't. Back then, giving it to a repeat winner wasn't as common. I think that kind of hurt him a little bit too, and ever trying to win more than 3. And again, the '81 season we'll get to. Let's see. He's 22nd all time in WAR, the stat we were discussing earlier. This is among all players. He's 22nd all time. Again, he's 7th among all pitchers. And He had 9 seasons in the top 10 in WAR for all players. Again, so in almost half his seasons, he was in the top 10 for wins above replacement for all players in baseball. So, again, a very, very impressive statistic, and it shows just how dominant he was compared to all the other pitchers when he was actually more on the level of a Joe Morgan or a Pete Rose or a Johnny Bench. Although, ironically, he only made the playoffs once with the Reds, and that was after the Big Red Machine kind of was in decline a bit. And in '79 when they lost to the We Are Family Pittsburgh Pirates. But at least he did have one more moment of taking a team to a division title with a different team other than the Mets. So that also solidified his legacy as a winner. Now, in 1981, he may have had the most consistent pitching year in Major League history. He went 7-1 at home. This is for the Cincinnati Reds, and that was in that strike-shortened year. He went 7-1 at home, 7-1 on the road. He went 7-1 in the first half of the season before this 2-month strike, and then he went 7-1 in the second half of the season. He went 7-1 against the National League East, his old division with the Mets, including beating the Mets, and he went 7-1 against the NL West, his division with the Reds. I mean, you don't get much more consistent than that. In fact, me and one of my friends at the time, we used to joke, he went 7-1 in like any split thing in life. Like, he went 7-1 when it was cloudy. He went 7-1 when it was sunny. He went 7-1 when he woke up late. He went 7-1 when he woke up early. He went 7-1 when he had eggs for breakfast. He went 7-1 when he had cereal. We'd always make things up. Sometimes things to do with what's going on at the time, in the early 80s. So, an inside joke at the time. Just because, I mean, you don't get much more consistent than Tom Seaver's 81 season. However, both he and the Reds came up short that year because Fernando won the Cy Young, Fernando Mania. I mean, Fernando's stats are great for that year, even though Seaver had one more win, and he had the much more consistent season. But Fernando's hard to deny him, even though I do think Seaver should have won it, even though I'm a little biased. I saw him pitch opening day 1977 at Wrigley Field. Shook the hand of then Governor Jim Thompson, if any of you watching that know who he is. Wrigley Field 77, before it became all trendy and fashionable and gentrified as it is now. I cried the night he was traded, the Midnight Massacre, June 15th, 1977. I became an instant Reds fan. I was still a Mets fan, but I became a Reds fan as well. I actually heard his no-hitter that he pitched against the Cardinals on the radio. It was like a weird random thing. It was summer in Chicago, 78. I was just playing around the radio randomly, and then I picked up Seaver. I heard that it was Seaver pitching, and I realized it was the Reds-Cardinals game. I figured it out after a couple of batters or whatever, and then realized he was pitching no-hitter. So I actually got to listen to his no-hitter on the radio live, and it was this weird random thing, and I always took that as a sign of how I was kind of tuned in with Tom Seaver as being my favorite pitcher, my favorite baseball player. I saw him pitch for the White Sox as well. Watched him on TV all the time. Saw his 300th game on TV. Wish I would have been there for it, but it was great to watch on TV. He's in the Mets and Reds Hall of Fame. You know, two teams besides getting it up until it was Ken Griffey Jr. and then Mariano Rivera broke it. He had the highest vote percentage ever for a Hall of Famer. So what it comes down to is Tom Seaver, the greatest Major League pitcher ever, now belongs to the ages. Thanks for watching the Darwin Blinks channel.